Hey guys, welcome to FranklinWoodWorks. I'm going to be making a desk to go in my music studio, but a desk needs legs, and I wanted to do something I've never done before, and although I haven't really looked around all that much, I've never seen it done before. I'm going to be making the legs using double bridle joints, but these joints are going to be at a 45-degree angle, not the usual 90 degrees. But will they be strong enough to hold a desktop that weighs about 75 pounds, plus all the equipment that goes on it? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out. I'm going to make these legs out of some old lengths of 2x6 a friend gave me. These things look pretty old and are hard and dry, so the first thing I do is flatten them on the jointer and make sure I have a nice 90-degree angle on one of the edges. Then over to the planer to get the other side flat and parallel with the side I flattened on the jointer. I don't really care how much I have to plane away to get them flat, but it's important that they are all exactly the same. Once all the wood is planed down, I go over to the table saw. Now since these boards are all roughly 5.5 inches wide, and the maximum height of my table saw blade is 3 1/8 inches, I can go through the pieces and use the best portions of the wood, avoiding any knots that may be a structural problem. Once that is done, I cut all of the pieces down to 3 1/8 inches wide. The legs are going to form the shape of a Z, which means that if you're looking at the desk from the side, the legs will look just like a Z, with a long bottom on the floor and the long top attached to the desk. The cross piece will be at a 45-degree angle between the two. When I cut the wood to length on the miter saw, I use a stop block to make sure that each piece is identical to its counterpart. For the top and bottom pieces, only one end will have a 45-degree angle, but both ends of the cross piece will have a 45. So to cut the mortises at a 45 and to have the shoulders of the tenon at a 45, I had to make a jig, similar to a normal tenoning jig, that will allow me to make perfectly repeatable mortises and tenons at a perfect 45-degree angle, and allow me to reverse the workpiece and keep the angle exact. I did that by laying out my 45s on the upright portion of the jig, and I put in dowels that the workpiece will rest on. A clamp in the middle to keep the workpiece from moving makes the jig very accurate. I raise the table saw blade to the height of the workpiece. Now the blade that I'm using has a flat grind, so I won't have to do any cleanup on the inside of the mortises or the shoulders of the tenons. I roughly divide the thickness of the workpiece into thirds, keeping in mind that the exact thickness of the tenons and mortises aren't all that important as long as they are all exactly the same, which the jig allows me to do. Using the workpiece that I've marked, I begin to cut the mortise, flipping the piece back and forth, taking small shavings each time until I have the desired width of the mortise. To make sure that all the work pieces are identical, I don't touch the table saw fence, and I go through each workpiece that will have a mortise, and I cut the sides of the mortises in each. I wait to hog out the rest of the mortise until after I have done this on all of the workpieces. That way, each mortise is exactly the same. After hogging out the rest of the mortises, it's time to cut the tenons. The process is basically the same, taking away a little each time, flipping the workpiece around so the tenon is perfectly centered, and checking my progress by test fitting with the existing mortises. Once I get the fit I like, I again keep the table saw fence where it is and make all of the defining cuts for the thickness of the tenons. Only then do I hog out the remaining portion of the workpieces, giving me the 45-degree shoulders. Remember I said these would be double bridle joints? I only cut one bridle joint on the end of each piece, So I have to laminate the work pieces together. So after laying down the glue, I had to nail the two pieces together so they wouldn't move during clamping. I need to make sure that the glue joints are really good on all of the pieces. Not only do they need to be strong, but since I'm going to paint the legs, I don't want them to look like wood. When I laminated the cross pieces with the tenons together, I had to tape off the tenon area to keep the glue squeeze out from messing up the tenon shoulders. Although this took some time, I think it was easier than having to clean it all up with a chisel later. When the laminations were dry, I scraped away the glue, then ran the pieces through the table saw again, shaving a 1/16 off each side, leaving me with a laminated leg that is 3 inches wide. This will ensure that my 3 1/8 inch tenon will be proud of the joint, which will allow me to plane them smooth. The glue up for the joint itself is fairly easy, but it is really messy. I made sure I had a good coat of glue on all of the long grain, then clamped the joints after making sure they were at a perfect 45. A little glue and some sawdust fills in any gaps that may be left. I'm not worried about the gaps as far as strength goes. The joint will be plenty strong, but I'm going to paint the legs, and I want the painting surface to be as flawless as possible. One reason I'm going to paint the legs is because my son wants me to. I made the legs out of pine because I had it on hand, and even if I didn't, it would have been cheap to buy. But I don't want any of the knots, any of the joints, or even any wood grain to be visible. So after touching up the legs with a little wood filler here and there, I gave the legs a good sanding. Then I gave them a couple of coats of primer and followed that up with several coats of flat black enamel. The results were even better than I hoped for. The only mistake I made that I need to fix is that I miscalculated the height of the legs by 1.5 inches. So I'll probably have to make some feet to go on the bottom of the legs in order to get the height of the desk right. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. The desk build will be coming soon, so I hope you'll stick around for that video. I'd appreciate hearing your comments or questions about the legs, and I try to get back with everyone that has a question as soon as I can. So I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and there you go.